Hey everyone, Corey here with MindfulBit. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about variables, global, local, non-local, and variable scope, and sort of what that means. We'll be using Python today just to mix things up. Some of my tutorials are in Java, some are in Python. The main concepts remain the same though. So just let me give you an idea about what scope is. It might be kind of confusing, especially if you're coming in to hear the word scope. Like, what does scope mean? And so I think that you can visualize it by imagine yourself and the different things that people call you. Um, they might call you your name. You might have a nickname only to your college friends. Your mom might have a special name that she calls you. I grew up and for some reason I had a nickname, Cocoa Pebbles, and Costa Rica. All those names, make sense in the context of the person who says them. So, for example, let's take this function. We'll have a function called mom, and in her scope, she might print your name, right? So we can run this, and if we call her method, we're going to call the mom method, it'll print my name. So to her, my name is Corey, right? And let's just take this example a step further. Let's define a local variable called name. And I'm going to set that value to Corey. Okay? Let's say in the mom method, in the scope of your mother, name is Costa Rica. And then what I want to do is print name. So when I call the mom function, what's going to get printed? As you can see, Costa Rica is printed. So let's say I define a method called stranger, and let's find out what they would print, right? I'm going to use the regular old name. I'm not going to override it, so to speak. And instead of mom, let's call stranger. And let's run that. And what you're going to find is the stranger calls you Corey. So let's do one more called significant other. And in the scope of the significant other, your name might be baby, right? So then if the significant other is the person talking to you, they might call you baby, as you can see. So this is just kind of like an idea of what scope is. I want you to think of it in non-computer programming terms. Think of it as, it's a way to identify a variable for the scope of what it's running in. And this is very important as far as a computer is concerned, because you can have multiple variables with the same name in different scopes. So the program has to keep track of that, and it keeps track of that through something called a stack trace. So anytime a method is called, it gets pushed onto the stack, and any variables that are inside of that scope are going to be referenced only for that scope. So let's say that we actually want to update our global name. Can we do that inside of one of these functions, right? Let's say our mother, for instance, forgets that she calls us Costa Rica and she wants to start calling us what she used to call us. So what I can say is let's use the global name. This is global. It's not inside of a method. It's up here at the top. These are methods. You can tell because they have a def, method name, and a method signature, an argument list. So we're going to say global name, name equals Costa Rica, and then we're going to print name. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call our mom method, which should update our global name variable to Costa Rica. So what we should see is Costa Rica printed twice. Now you can see we've updated the global variable name. So here's something cool. After we call the mom method, what happens if we call stranger? Take a moment and try to think about what we'll see. So what will be the output of these two methods if I call mom and then I call stranger? Well, let's run it and find out. As you can see, we get Costa Rica, Costa Rica. Okay, and the reason that happens is because, let's go into the mom method here, and I'll set some breakpoints so you can see. We'll just debug. And if you're unfamiliar, this is a IDE called PyCharm. It's really, really nice. I believe they offer a free community edition. I highly recommend installing PyCharm if you're doing any kind of Python development. I've had nothing but good experiences with it. So what I want to do here is pop into our debug mode. Okay. And you can see our trace here. Name. Okay. There's name set to Corey, and we're referencing the global name at this point. Now we're going to call the name equal Costa Rica method, and you should see now if we look at name, it's set to Costa Rica. Let's inspect it. So that's what happens there, and it's only because we set the global variable here. Without that global keyword, it thinks we're talking about mom's scope instead of the global scope. So if I were to remove this global, we would go back to Costa Rica and Corey. Okay? So let's go through, now that's just a general idea. I've got a website that actually has examples of different types of variables. So let's go through each one after my little example to try to solidify your understanding. So here's one where we are creating a global variable x and we're assigning it the string value global. We have a method foo defined here that prints x. We call foo and then we also are going to print x again. So the output we should see from this function is, we call foo, we should print x inside the value of global. Then we'll call this print method here. It'll print x outside with the value of global. So what we should see is x inside global, x outside global. Let's run it. All right, exactly as we expected. And the reason this is because they're both referencing the same global value that was defined. Once again, it's global because it's defined outside of any function scope or any method scope, and it's available to every function inside of this particular file. Okay, so that's example one. Now let's do this example. And I want you to take a moment and try to imagine what happens here. You'll see we're calling the method foo. We're setting x equal to x times 2. Alright, and what we're going to get is local variable x is referenced before assignment. So what we've done here is when the interpreter sees x equals, it assumes that x is a local variable, right? Because we didn't define it as global. If we wanted it to be global, we would have done this, right? Then it would know. but we didn't do that. So it thinks it's local, and now we're trying to access it here, but it hasn't been defined. So you get local variable x referenced before assignment. So let's talk about local variables real quick with an example. This one will be accessing a local variable outside of scope. So I want you to take a look at this. Obviously you can see the y is underlined in red, which means there's an issue. Let's see what is happening here. We've got one function defined, foo, and foo sets our variable y equal to local. So down here in our file we call the function foo, and then we try to print y, and yet it's saying unresolved reference to y. Now the reason it's doing that is because y is defined in foo's scope. No one else knows who y is. No one else has a clue who y is. So when you try to print y down here in the global scope, it doesn't know because y is a local variable. So in order to actually print y, we would need to define y as a global variable, like so. And then it would know that y is global, everyone has access, and then we will be able to print it. So let's create a local variable in this example. We have one method foo, it sets y equal to local, and it prints y. Everything is inside of foo's scope. There's no logic outside of the scope. So if I were to run this, we should see local printed. Easy. So there's no global variables here. Everything is inside foo's scope. The only thing we're doing here is running method foo. So no, we don't have any issues here. Now, for the last example, if I were to try to print y outside of foo's scope, I'm going to get an issue, right? Or if I define another method, foo2, and I try to print y from inside there, I'm going to have an issue. Why? Because y is not a global variable. If I were to set y to global here, then it works. Okay? So there's another example. Now we're going to use global and local variables in the same code. So let's take a look at this one. Take a moment. What do you think the output's going to be? We print x and we print y. So what we do up here is we set x equal to global. We tell the foo method, hey, we want to use the global version of this variable. We set y equal to local. We multiply x by 2, and then we print x and print y. So as you can see, we print global, global, and then local. And the only reason we were able to do that is because we defined x as a global variable, and we know it's global because it's defined up here outside of the scope. If I were to get rid of that global declaration, then we see that it complains that x is unreferenced and unresolved. Alright. Now here's one. This is going to be a global variable and a local variable with the same name. So let's take a look at this. Take a moment, look at it, think about what might get printed. So here we have a global declaration saying that x is 5. So we have a global variable x equal to 5. Here we have a local variable x equal to 10. Inside the foo method we print the local. Outside of the foo method we print the global. I mean, they're both the same variable name, but just like our example earlier with the names, depending on the scope, the name has different meaning or value. So we should see local and then global. The local's 10, the global's 5. Okay. Now we're going to do a non-local variable example. Okay. And let's see what we get here. Nonlocal x. Unresolved reference nonlocal x is our output for this. And I believe this example actually is using a version of Python that's not supporting nonlocal with version 2.7 that I'm using. So we're going to ignore this example. I don't want to confuse you. But that's the general gist of it. Function, scope. In order to really truly understand variables, you need to understand scope and what scope means. So once again, as a reminder, the scope is when you call a method, imagine you're diving in deeper and deeper. It's like Inception, okay? Think Inception. It's a dream within a dream within a dream. You know, you can look up the word recursion, but that's what a stack trace is. When you run a program, you keep diving in deeper and deeper into these different methods, and each dream might have its own version of the same named variable. Or let's say you go 5 dreams in and you actually want to reference the variable from the first dream. You can do that. So think about that, and that's kind of where the complexity comes in. You can have a global variable that all your Inception dreams can access. So let's say if there was a keyword that every person knew to say in the dream to get out of it, that would be global. Or you could have local variables like the setting in each dream, or the time period in each dream, right? So that would be specific to the scope, which is the dream. So try to think of examples of scope in your life and sort of what that means. And just play around with it. Get into PyCharm, start coding some stuff up, and do some print statements and see what you find. That's the best way to learn. So give that a shot. Let me know down below if you have any questions, and I will be talking to you guys very soon. Reminder, do go to MindfulBit if you are interested in following my blogs or my videos. If you find these helpful or have any questions or recommendations, I'll be happy to hear them. And I also provide software development coaching, so would love to help get you to the next level of your career. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.